Hi guys! Today we're going to talk about vector artwork for enamel pins, and I'm going to show you how I approach the process of creating the vector artwork I use. To start off, in case you're not familiar what a vector is, it's a type of image. Most of the images that you encounter are files like JPEG, PNG, things like that, and those are all raster images. And what raster means is that the image is made up of individual pixels. And for most things, that's fine. You run into issues though when you're changing the size of an image because the computer doesn't know how to interpret that, and the image will start looking really crappy and grainy if you enlarge it. It's less of an issue when you're shrinking an image, but vector just has a lot more advantages when it comes to rescaling artwork. Instead of being made up of individual pixels, vector artwork is created with paths and curves, and these are basically mathematical equations that talk about points in relation to one another instead of pixels on coordinates. And the benefit of that is you can scale an image much larger or much smaller. It doesn't matter. The image will always be just as crisp as it was at the size you created it. The other benefits of vector is that they actually take up a lot less storage space on your computer. The files are much smaller. Vector artwork is also used a lot in product manufacturing because things like plotters and routers, they use the paths and curves as instructions for how they should be moving and cutting and doing whatever it is they do. So that's why we use vector artwork in enamel pins, because the process of creating the mold for enamel pin, it needs to be a vector for it to work properly. So for that reason, the vector artwork is unavoidable in enamel pins. It's just a question of whether you're doing it or your manufacturer is doing it for you. And if your manufacturer is doing your vector artwork for you, you're paying more for it. They're not doing it for free. And the process of creating vector artwork can go one of two ways. It can go auto trace, in which the computer sees the raster image and does its best to convert it to vectors without you having to trace anything or do anything yourself. It does its best based on the settings you input. I personally don't like this. I think the results end up looking pretty crappy, and if you do use it, you end up having to go back and make so many changes that you might as well have just done it yourself from the start. The other way is to do it manually by essentially tracing it with the pen tool. And you may think that would mean that if two different people trace the same image, it'll come out looking the same. And that's not quite true. It takes skill. So some people who are less skilled, the artwork might not coming out looking as smooth. They might not take the time to taper lines off because by default, the pen tool lines are one width, and so they're not probably going to cut corners and not do things like that. All in all, making vector artwork is a very valuable skill to have, and I would never outsource it to my manufacturer. Which takes us to how I actually create my vector artwork. So I start with my raster sketch that I bring into Adobe Illustrator. I generally have an idea of the size I want the final pin to be, and I will scale the raster image to that size. I paste it on a layer of its own. I use the template option for that layer, and that just controls some visibility settings that makes the whole process a little easier to see. And then I create a new layer above the template, and that's where I create the vector artwork. I have some preset graphic styles for strokes just because I tend to use the same stroke weight and settings. So if you take note of the stroke window and the settings there, the graphic styles box is just variations usually with a different stroke size. And I keep my stroke settings in millimeters, not points, because I feel like points is not something most people know what that translates to in real life. Millimeters is measurable. As a general rule, I do not go thinner than 0.2 millimeters on any stroke, and I don't really use anything above 0.5. You definitely could go above 0.5. That just tends to be like my average for maximum thickness. The actual process of creating these paths for the vector artwork is incredibly boring and tedious. You're just placing points and pulling the handles on these points to create curves. Now, one thing I want to point out that I'm doing here is a lot of people don't know about this feature. It's the stroke width. If you're on a PC, I believe it is Control W, and you can actually control the specific thickness of the stroke at any given point by using this tool and making it wider or thinner at any point. And I use it to taper off lines and give them a more natural look. If you see a skinny dialog box pop up in the top left corner, that is part of a plugin I have for Adobe Illustrator. It's called Extreme Path 2 from Sea Valley. I bought this way back when I first started using Adobe Illustrator in 2012, and it's a more ergonomic way of using the pen tool. It lets you just like drag on the point and make it go where you want, and also has tools to create symmetrical curves and copy angles and things like that, at least in the version of Illustrator I have, which is CS5, weren't available. I don't know if they are available in the Creative Cloud, but they can price CS5 for my cold dead hands because I'm not paying for a subscription model. I just looked and it costs $140. I think it's been the same price for, since I bought it, and it's definitely worth it. You don't have to pay for any upgrades or anything like that. You buy it once, you're done. So if you do a lot of vectoring, I highly recommend it. Here's a little trick for vectoring things like tails. Instead of going around the shape of the tail, I will just create one stroke, and I will use the stroke width tool to make it look like that shape of the tail. And then I go into the object menu, path, and outline path, and it creates an outline of the shape I just made, and then I can erase the parts I don't need. I actually use the outline path feature a lot, so much in fact that I have it hotkeyed, and you will not see me going into the menus to do this because I'm just using my keyboard. Another little cheat I do is I steal parts of artwork that I've made previously, so I'm just going to steal his little arm since it's roughly the same shape. If you see the ends of paths sticking out in places where they shouldn't be, don't worry about those. I actually just leave those there, and at the very end I erase the tips that are, poking into areas they shouldn't be. If I have an area of all metal, like here on the pumpkin stump, instead of doing a path, sometimes I'll use the blob tool, Shift B on the PC, and it creates a fill area. It's pretty neat, and if I need to, I use the smooth tool to even it out, or I'll just manually manipulate the points. Once I'm done creating the artwork, I group it, make a copy of it, and then with this new copy, I do the outline stroke option I did before, and that turns everything into a fill instead of a stroke. So everything's filled with black now. Now I'm going to go back and erase any of those little ends of paths that poke out into areas where they shouldn't, and I just do that with the Control-E erase tool. Once that step is taken care of, I will make an area of color and I place it below my line art, and then I select both that box and the artwork, and I use the Pathfinder option merge. And what that option does is it basically converts everything to what you see is what you get. All the black areas are connected if they're touching, all the pink areas are cut out, and now your artwork is ready for coloring. And you can do that by either selecting the areas and changing the fill color, or if you want to do it more quickly, you can do the live paint option. And that just basically gives you a color bucket and lets you drop color in like you would in a real super basic MS Paint type way. I start by changing my artwork from black to the metal color that I plan on using. So in this case, I use a gold color. And then I open up my Pantone color book, which you do in the swatches menu. You go to color books and then you pick the one you want to use. I use solid coated. I have a downloaded version that's a little more current than the one that came with CS5 by default because they've updated it. And from here on, it's easy peasy. You're just picking the colors you want and placing them where you like. After that, all you have to do is go back to the live paint and select expand, and then grab all your artwork again and do the merge option just one more time, because sometimes it splits fill areas into multiple sections if there's like a tight area. So just make sure you merge it all at the end, and then you have your finished production line art ready to go. One thing I just want to add is that if you don't have a Pantone fan deck or a Pantone color book, do not trust the way the colors look in your program, because everyone's monitor is calibrated differently. Just because a color looks a certain way to you on your screen doesn't mean it's going to look that way on anyone else's screen, and that doesn't even matter because that's not what your manufacturer is going to be comparing it to. They're going to be comparing it to a physical color book. So if the color book does not look like what's on your screen, you trust the color book. Do not trust what's on your screen. So if you pick a color and it looks way different on screen and it looks kind of bad, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look like that. So I put Pantones in my production file, and if they actually don't look like that, I will choose a final color that looks more accurate on screen to show for mock-up images for things like Kickstarter and stuff, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Even though I have no idea what monitor they're going for, I just want to make sure it looks correct to me at least. And there you go. Once you're done, all you have to do is make a swatch key if you'd like, specify the size, even though it should be 100% right now, and send it off to your manufacturer. Good luck. Bye.